Alright, hello. You may be noticing that we are in the old simulacrum, and you will notice why we're in the old simulacrum very quickly. This video will be about the damage buff abilities in the game, all of them pretty much. So you will learn how to mod around damage buffing abilities, you will learn how you can play weapons platforms and how weapon platforms work, so you can understand how to build your weapons around the weapons platform Warframe and what happens with certain buff up abilities that straight up buff your damage and how they do it. So without further ado, let's start with abilities that straight up buff your elemental damage. So we'll go a Gauss here and we'll take an Excelsior. Good combo, in my opinion. So right here we have a Gauss build. This would be kind of standard weapons platform Gauss, where you would go Shock with Shock Trooper and then Thermal Sander with Thermal Transfer and get any kind of tankiness, etc. from Kinetic Plating and Redline. So this is a very standard Gauss build, pretty much. Just needs more format to fit in prime sure footed here and it's good to go. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how this performs, but before we do, I will need to show you something that is very important. So right now, Shock will give us electricity damage and Thermal Transfer gives us heat and cold damage. So our Exceltra Prime here is modded for corrosive. So the question is, am I able to get radiation damage through my damage buffing abilities? Because I have heat, electricity, and cold. So in theory, you might say, yes, if you combine first heat and then electricity, and you add cold after, then yes, you should be able to get corrosive, radiation, and cold. That would make sense, right? Well, let's see in action. So I will first add the heat proc and then the electricity proc, and let's shoot right now. So we see corrosive and now we see a heat proc. I mean, it's dealing damage, but that's weird. Let's add the cold as well. Oh, now we see blast. What is going on here, you may ask? And as you can see now, with that blast damage of yours, we're dealing less damage to these guys because the damage distribution is completely fucked since blast deals nothing. So, what is going on here is the damaging abilities that are adding some editing specific stats of elemental damage will be combined with whatever elemental damage you already have on your weapon. So here, if I add Volt's Shock Trooper ability, I will just increase my corrosive damage. If I remove Stormbringer right here, now here it starts getting interesting. Because right now, if I add electricity, and then I add heat, look what happens. I get electricity and gas. But how is that possible? I added electricity first, and then I added heat. Well, let's do a different thing. I will unequip this so I can remove any kind of buffs that I had. Let's add heat first and electricity second. And as we can see, there is the same exact results. This is because there is some priority that goes into the abilities when talking about elemental stuff. And Thermal Sander goes behind Shock Trooper no matter what order you put it in. So is there any way right now that we can get a corrosive stat in here? Well, let's try to start from cold and under electric. Or wait, I didn't press the critical. We get viral electric through this. Now that's good, but what if we add heat now? Magnetic and gas. So as you can see, there is like no quite... Nothing really makes sense here. Because as you saw before, the heat part of Thermal Thunder was taking priority over, you know, Volt's electric buff. But now that we added cold first, we had the cold take priority because Thermal Thunder takes priority first, and then electric. But then when we added heat, then the heat proc got priority and combined with the innate weapons toxin damage to make gas again. Which means if you wanted to play this weapons platform, you would have to change your build in a very, very weird way to play it out. It would feel kinda unintuitive, and it's not really worth it. Because the Shock Trooper ability, as long with Thermal Transfer, works with this way, one thing to bypass this is adding Oberon Smite with Smite Infusion instead. Smite Infusion takes your elemental damage and adds radiation directly to it instead of having this weird mix of abilities taking priority over other abilities. Now, which abilities take priority over other abilities? I am not 100% sure because I haven't looked into it much, since it is not really worth it mixing these abilities in that kind of way. But what I can tell you is two things. First of all, Saryn's Toxic Lash will add flat toxin damage no matter what element you have. So if you have corrosive, you will have corrosive and toxin. Like, that is a final additive toxin damage buff. It is working in a different way. So if you play Saryn, you don't have to worry about that. And I'll show that after as well. But if you play something like Gauss or something like Volt, this is something that you have to think about. But we'll get to Volt in a bit. For now, let's continue with Gauss. Now, I switched back to the corrosive build. And I'm gonna show that now, as expected, when we do this, now we get corrosive, blast, and radiation. Now, blast is not really worth it when talking about thermal transfer. So what instead you can do is not cast the cold damage part. So the best case scenario is adding Smite Infusion, then heat damage, and now you go. And now we have a corrosive radiation heat Xata, or any weapon you want. And you can even combine this with redline. Like, if you start killing here to get your energy procs going and you add redline to this, this can get very strong. Oh, I can hold them up. You get my point. So this is kind of the idea of mixing elements and how they do. And the elements themselves that we have in the game right now to mix. First of all, thermal transfer from Gauss, Smite Infusion from Oberon. Then we have Nourish from Grindle. Frost, I don't have the ability. You know, freeze augment, so you get that. Then, what was it? Have Volts. So Volts, let's talk about it a bit because he has two. He has the Shock, which we already took a look at, and then he has Electric Shield. So what is going on with Electric Shield exactly? So we're gonna see that here, if we add electricity damage to our Xata, it will just combine into the corrosive. We will never get an electric proc no matter how hard we try. But if we do the electric shield, now we can see electricity procs. This is because electric shield works in the same way as Saryn Toxic Lash, where it adds a final 50% electricity damage that is also multiplicative. So we get a plus 50% multiplier of electricity damage. While if you take a look at Shock, Shock gives the buff up of similarly as the mod would be Stormbringer. So this is like a 278% Stormbringer mod essentially. And this is the same for every other kind of damage buffing ability except for Volt Shield, Saryn's Toxic Lash, and I think that's it, but there might be more. I'll have to check more Warframes to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So that's what you need to know for now so far. Other Warframe abilities that give elemental damage. I don't think Mag does. No, Ninja doesn't. Equinox doesn't. Yeah. Ember's first ability for heat damage. Yeah, that's it when it comes to elemental damage. There is not many abilities in the game that give elemental damage, thankfully. I don't think I've missed any. I don't think any new Warframe takes elemental. I don't know if Corvex does, but I doubt it. Hydroid gives corrosive, I forgot. And obviously Saryn also gives corrosive. Where's Hydroid? With his Plunder. Plunder gives corrosive damage to his weapons, which is really, really strong. So, yeah, I mean, these are kind of it, but let's take a look now. You know, you have Volt right here. You can easily go a corrosive hit build with this Xata and add an electricity proc on top of that. So, if we go right here and spawn these enemies back up and try to play with this, we do this, heat proc, and then shield. And now look. We get heat, electricity, slash, and corrosive. So we get a triple dot with corrosive on top of that. And if you have someone with Nourish on your squad, you can add viral damage to this as well. So you can imagine what weapon platform can do. It can cover every single enemy in the game. Or every single element, my bad, in the game. If you mod it correctly and if you have a squad that is coordinating. And that's why weapons platforms are so strong and why they're meta in arbitrations. Because you can imagine if I had Volt here and I used an Ogris with 0 mod. This Ogris, imagine it had only mods to help its ammo sustainability. And then you added a Saryn with Nourish. And then you added, I don't know, Ember. You could add Ember. Like, you can do so much stuff with weapons platforms. You could add unironically Rhino and Chroma after for multiplicative buff into the additive buff. I don't know. There is just so many things to do to add more damage to your weapons. And this is why Volt and Saryn are the top tiers. So, Saryn right now that I'm gonna show, I have Eclipse on her. Because I will show you why I like Eclipse on her. But I do believe I also have a Roar build. No, never mind. I only use Eclipse. I'm bored of Saryn. But basically, on Saryn you have free corrosive with spores, and the augment from Venom dose, and then you could add Nourish for free viral, and then you have free toxin as well. So if we take a weapon that has viral in it, like this one has viral heat, we take this, and then we add Toxic Lash and the corrosive thing from the Omnibus. And now you see we have Toxin, Heat, Viral, and Corrosive whenever we want to pro corrosive. So when this stacks on something like the Ogris or anything that does damage over time, you see that dot procs are gonna go crazy. So very strong contender for Roar that we're gonna talk about in a bit. But this is also a very big thing for melee weapons, because melee weapons, something like the Zoris, scale with Toxic Lash twice as much. So whatever Toxic Lash says here, you're gonna get double the amount for your melee. And as I said, this is a multiplier at the end, so it's very strong. So we do this. We see Electric, Toxin. Very strong. And obviously you can get better. This is a non-Riven modded Zoris. It just, you know, exists kinda for testing purposes. Overall, this is why Saryn is S tier and will always be S tier. Unless Venom Dose gets nerfed, there is no way you can make Saryn bad. Because she is gonna be a top tier damage dealer for weapons platform from Augment and Toxic Lash alone. And this is why people love her as well. She's also capable of being safe as long as he plays a Shield Gate build, which As you see, I don't. I'm usually on a squad playing Saryn, so I'm going for health tanking with the wisp buffs and shit like that. That doesn't matter though. So this is kind of it when it comes to damage buffing with elemental bonuses. Just keep in mind whenever you do have these elemental bonuses that you either take a look on Simulacrum, which one takes priority first if you're going to use something like Gauss or Volt, or straight up use an ability that gives you your desired combined element, like Smite Infusion, for example, or Nourish, so you can freely try to mod for other stuff on your weapon. So, for example, on this Saryn, right, if we had Nourish here, the best bet for this Ogress would be to completely bypass the cold mode and add gas damage with infected clip or wildfire somewhere, and just like even if I just remove this and I had this would do better for Saryn with Nourish than adding this and going back to Nourish, because then we would have way more viral waiting, even more than we do now. So you understand really quickly that this can get very strong when adding way too much elemental damage from said abilities. Now let's try to scale this even more. Actually no, before we do, I'll show Ember as well because of heat inherit mechanics. So Ember, this is the weapon platforms that I did. The first video that actually popped off on my channel was the one that I made about Ember, and the one that put me on the map. So gun abilities bad XDD. The Ember abilities are fun, but they're not as useful, obviously. So Fireball Frenzy, the augment that gives you the heat damage, it scales flat with ability strength. So the more people you have heat procs on being dealt heat damage, the more strength you're gonna have, the stronger Fireball Frenzy is gonna be. But this is the thing, right? So if we take a nuker, right? I take this nuker and I cannot remove anything from my builds. Shit. I take the Cyclone. Okay. And then I don't put anything except my Raven mod. My Raven mod has heat and crit damage. Nothing else. And now we add Cascadia Flare. Look what's gonna happen here. So we have this thing. And now you see the heat procs, they're pretty good, but around with 40 bullets we got 37 heat procs on these guys. Now I'm gonna do the Fireball Frenzy. Did I miss him? Well, that just had a chance trolling me, to be honest, but you see, before we were getting a lot of radiation procs. Right here we're getting 0. We're getting straight up heat damage, so whenever we have a chance to proc status, it's always gonna be heat, almost. This is very important because heat damage scales infinitely. It literally never stops. So adding any status chance here will completely break it. Literally any status chance and it completely breaks. And now you have so much heat damage on this that you could unironically mod for something different, like corrosive, let's say. Here, corrosive radiation heat. Now, heat is primarily the element we have anyways, but because of Ember, we're gonna get even more. So look how fast the heat procs go up. And then the damage of the heat procs themselves go nuts. But this is not the only strong part about heat. Heat also cuts out enemy armor by 50%. Along with corrosive, it cuts it to like 95%, I think, because they're multiplicative with each other. So 90% and 50% of 90% is 5%. So 95% armor reduction from that. And now if we take any weapon that can deal heavy hit procs, like I don't know, we take Phantasma. Where is it? Unironically, normal Phantasma. There we go. So my normal Phantasma is very heavily skewed into hit. So this is basically what hit inherit is. If we take a weapon and we just add hit procs to the enemies, and then we take a stronger weapon and tap them, they're gonna inherit the damage from the stronger weapon, but with the amount of hit procs you had from the other one. So 6.5k, 11k, 28k. You see that it goes nuts. Right here we have 1300, 7000. So, you know, the more hit procs you have, the stronger it's gonna get. And this is the easiest thing to check it is with Gauss. So, if we go back to Gauss to showcase this, and we use a more normal build for Thermos Under. This is not the most optimal one, but it's more normal for sure. And then we go for Unairi to strip armor. You're gonna see that if we do like these many hit procs and then we armor strip, all of the hit procs were dealt to these guys into blast instantly, dealing 27,000 damage. Now obviously, because if it was from the Cyclone, they're not strong enough, but if we do Cyclone, then one tap from this, 29,000. And this was less hit procs as well. This is because the hit procs inherited the damage from the Phantasma instead, which is a little bit more. It's a tiny bit stronger. And obviously, you know, if it completely bypasses armor, your hit procs are gonna go nuts. And this is why I think Ember is the strongest. So Ember has the hit inherit mechanic. It has infinite hit procs basically from hit damage being so much on this. You can add Roar, which we're gonna talk about now. You have 90% damage reduction, and then you have 100% armor strip from this. So you don't need anything. You literally just need somebody to help you with health regen a bit. So you just take a Wisp in the squad, or a Citrine, or both even, and you guys have a goated squad. And this is why I kinda suggested that people try out Ember, and suggested that Ember is probably the strongest, just because of all the quality of life changes and how OP heat damage is. But you can take this information and do whatever you want with it. Overall, I would say Saryn, Volt, Ember, all three of them are really nice. Play whoever you prefer. Saryn will always be OP. Now, there is 3 or 4 more abilities that are not covered yet. These are not to do with elements, but with actual buffing to your damage. Now that I'm thinking about it, they're not only 4, they're way more, because I'm looking at these frames and then I can count more and more and more and more abilities that can straight up buff your damage. So let's get to the one that is about to change, and the one that F's in the chat. We can already cry looking at her. What are they doing to you, my dear? What are they doing? So, Eclipse. Eclipse is by far the most OP damage buffing ability when it comes to weapon platform Warframes. And why is that? Well, the 636% you see on the top right is multiplicative only to weapons. What does this mean? Well, if my weapon deals damage on direct impact to the enemy, the damage is multiplied by this stat that is 636%. So my Ogres here on the initial hits is dealing 636% more damage, but the hit procs after and Nightwatch Napalm are dealing the damage that they would do normally. But obviously, since this is multiplicative, you know, it scales really well. It scales really well. So Any ability that scales with weapon damage when using Eclipse can skyrocket, and any Warframe or any weapon that can hit super hard while using Eclipse also becomes completely OP. So that normally doesn't happen, and I can prove it. I have one galvanized stack. He bled. Only reason he died. That guy had a viral poke on him, and I showed him he didn't even take enough damage. So you understand that Eclipse damage multiplier is super OP, and we're sad that it's being nerfed the way it is, because on Eclipse right now, if we take a look at the ability, it is a base of 200%. If they made the base 175, like it's on the subsume, and made the subsume 100, like 125 or even 100, 100 would still be absolutely bonkers as long as we could control it, because 95% of the time we're just not getting that maximum value like we're getting here on the simulacrum. So that's why I came on this simulacrum, because on the other one, no matter where you stand, you can never get it above 300%. Now, there are ways to cheat with the Eclipse, and that is with invisibility frames. Any invisibility frames, as long... So look, right now I have a 424% Eclipse on top right? Now at 498, this is now stuck on 498. No matter what you do, this is not gonna change. Unless you recast. Well, wait. Okay, this will be better because that one was on maximum. Anyways, now that you see, I'm standing on the light, 230, become visible again, 498, which is the maximum value. So, overall, invisibility frames could completely break Eclipse, and this is kind of what I used on Wisp all the time, and Wisp completely broken with Eclipse and stealth multipliers. This and that is now going to be completely nerfed to the ground. I mean, it makes sense. It was super OP, but it's not gonna work anymore because the contagion here gets multiplied by Eclipse twice, and Eclipse is a multiplier. So, yes, it was broken, but overall, it is sad to see it go. Will Mirage be good now? Well, to understand if Mirage will be good or not, we have to take a look at Chroma and how Chroma works. Because Eclipse is gonna work now just like Vex Armor does. So what does Vex Armor actually do? So this ability increases armor and weapon damage. So the weapon damage increase by Vex Armor is additive. It's like adding primary merciless or serration mod. How does this translate into actual gameplay? Well, there is many things, but we have to go back to our favorite spreadsheet with galvanized CO stuff and the video for how to mod primary weapons that also applies to secondary weapons as well, which I'm gonna get to because there is a bit of specifications for those. But basically, if your gun has multiplicative CO, it is on your best interest to use Chroma and Mirage now. Why is there a cat in my room? The fuck? Guys, I have closed all of the doors. My cat is in my room somehow. Every door was always closed. He's just here. Alright, cool. I mean, sure. You can stay. As I was saying, if your gun has multiplicative CO, like Xata does, then Chroma can really make it completely broken. If your gun has additive CO, however, something like the additive. Most weapons are additive. I just have to make sure. That's an aura, yes. Or the Godva. Both of them are additive. Tiberon, okay. So if we have a Tiberon Prime and we're using galvanized aptitudes, it is in our best interest if we use Chroma and Mirage to remove every kind of damage buff from Serration or Primary Arcane, and instead replace it with some kind of multiplicative buff or crit buff from something like Primary Frostbite or Primary Blight, and that's how we're gonna play. And this is the unfortunate reality of it, but right here, on this Tiberon Prime, it would be on my best interest if I was playing Chroma or Mirage, the new Mirage, to change the build around, go Corrosive Cold, and go for Primary Frostbite. This would massively increase my damage compared to Primary Deadhead, even if Deadhead gives me that 30% headshot multiplier, and overall make me have a good time. Now, I've already showed some variation of this with Prisma Lens on the previous video, so this time I'm gonna take the Ignis Wraith and show you how it works on this. As we see, the Ignis Wraith Aptitude Chamber, no damage on the build almost whatsoever with a Primary Merciless. So we're gonna spawn the enemies, unpose them, see what we get. So we're maxed. As you see now, without any stacks, we're doing damage, but even with stacks, we're pretty much dealing the same damage as when we were unstacked. So as you see, Vex Armor increases the damage by a lot when it comes to the first enemy, but after that, the damage stays the same. And this is where Nourish comes in for Chroma specifically, that, you know, is basically the saving grace for him. Now we know Nourish is gonna be nerfed in a way, and it's probably gonna be considered, the way I understand it, the way they describe the nerf, they're doing either two things. One would be to outright nerf the viral damage that you get to your weapons, and the other would be that Nourish is considered an actual damage ability like Vex Armor, Eclipse and such. So if I wouldn't be able to have it on my Chroma here, it would simply be removed. So these are the two iterations that I'm thinking of the Nourish nerf. Neither of them may be true, but if this does shape with the new Mirage, the best thing to do on new Mirage would be to go Smite Infusion and have more damage from Smite Infusion instead of your 4. And that would be a saving grace because the damage would be multiplied on a lot of instances depending on the gun you would pick. And every Mirage would probably run a Tenet Envoy from now on. So overall, for Mirage herself, it's not the end of the world if these changes ship the way Pablo said they will ship. But for any other Warframes, a 350% additive damage increase when Primary Merciless exists and it's 360% on its own, I'm gonna be honest, it's the biggest fucking dog shit. If you want that reference as well. So this build, the Eclipse build that I've been loving and been using for the past 4 years, it will be changed to something. We will find out what when the change is shipped alive, but for now, my speculation is Roar will be king. So, with that, let's see why Roar is so good. So Roar, just like Eclipse, is a multiplicative damage increase. But instead of Eclipse being only on direct impact with your weapons, this is on every single damage source that you can do, including damage over time effects, abilities, and it can also buff allies. So overall, this is really good because If you're taking a weapon and adding flash proc to it, then your weapon slash proc is gonna hurt way, way more. We're gonna see this in action. So, normally, this guy is dealt 12,000 slash, 18,000 after one kill, 21k, 13k. Now these are some decent numbers, right? And of course, with no damage buffs, I have said the Tonker is completely broken, not gonna lie, so if anyone's surprised, don't be. Now with Roar, not only will our initial damage hit deal 118% more, but the bleed itself we see deals 76,000 damage. So we get, for bleed, basically 118% impact damage, which scales to the bleed itself, and then the bleed itself dips on Roar again to deal 118% more damage on top of its already 118% more from the bonus damage itself, which gives us these completely ridiculous bleed procs of 315,000 right there. And this is why, if you're running any type of damage over time build, Roar is the way to go. This is the same for when running any kind of abilities build, or if you want to buff your teammates in any way. Now, with Roar, if we compare initial damage, if we take the same thing with the Xata and do the test, he was blood proc. Unlucky. To be honest, with one stack, it should be able to kill. Let's see. Not sure though. Okay, so as you see, that was an orange crit. An orange crit with Eclipse completely one-shotted him without the explosion. This time, we needed the explosion as well as the direct hit to actually one-shot the person. And this was with stacks, while Eclipse had 0 stacks whatsoever. So, overall, this is more damage for the initial assault as well, when you hit the enemies. But this is like having 105% Eclipse on you for direct hits, literally. And this is why Eclipse is so broken if you don't want to go any type of damage over time builds and you want to go straight into DPS with your gun directly. No dots, no nothing like that. Just straight up flat damage onto your gun. Eclipse is always going to be better. But Roar is obviously good, and Roar is better when it comes to dealing some kind of bleed damage. If you wanted to go internal bleeding on the Xata, for example, over, I don't know, any mode, literally, I could replace this, or even Vital Sense, and it would still be way, way better when it comes to doing this with Roar. So, very interesting to know about this and knowing how to itemize compared to your builds. So this means in general, though, that if we deal a slash proc and we have Eclipse, the slash proc is still gonna deal more damage with Eclipse. And why is that? Because the initial damage that was dealt to the enemy was 600% more, or 600% stronger, sorry. But when it comes to Roar, the damage was 100% stronger, and then your Roar was also 100% stronger. So that is basically completely breaking the thing. I can't even explain. This is like 1,000% damage basically to your bleed proc, and that's why it's completely broken. And obviously, if we add a Bane mode, since Roar applies the Bane mode on the hit and on the bleed proc, now you would have a bleed proc that would apply Bane, Roar, and then it would apply Bane, Roar again on the same factor, and then Roar would buff the Bane damage on top of that, because it double dips. So things get completely out of proportion when you factor in all of these, and this is why Bane modes and roar builds are being so popular. Generally, if you had a Bane mode and then you build roar, you completely one-shot every enemy. Same thing goes to Xata, which is what we're gonna see now. And since we know how roar works, we're gonna simplify Xata. So Xata's Whisper is basically an extra instance of damage whenever you do a damage type. How do I explain this? Imagine you're dealing a slash proc to the enemy. The slash proc is its own damage instance. Just like slash proc is its own damage distance, Xata's Whisper does the exact same thing. So if I take this Latron Prime for example, how much Xata's Whisper did it? 101%. Perfect. So we will see almost double the damage. Right? So on the heavies again. So if we hit this guy, 8496, right? 5727, 8496. Consistent, right? Now, if we add Xata, 101%, now we see way more damage. But you see that it showed 8496 again. But then we saw a number that was 8900 something. And that is the number we're interested in. That was the number that was broken from the Xata's Whisper. And when that number procs, we also get the bubble effect from Xata's Whisper. This. Which attracts every bullet on whatever we hit last time. So why is this good? We have to understand that because this is a second damage instance, if we did a shot with a weapon that is a guaranteed bleed, and we add Xata's Whisper, then instead of one bleed, we get two bleeds. Or basically it's multi-shot, so you get a second proc of whatever you would proc. Right now that guy we got 3 bleeds, for example. The bleed proc itself isn't more damage, but because it's more bleed procs and they stack, it's gonna be more damage by the end on those bleed procs. Or any kind of dot damage that you're gonna deal, right? But then again, if we factor in a Bane mode once again, and we go Bane of Grenier for example, if we add a Bane of Grenier mode here instead of Serration, suddenly, well, we kind of fuck up our slash proc, you know, the chance to get a slash proc, but at the same time, we have basically the Bane mode working on the initial assaults, on the Xata's Whisper assaults, and on both instances of any bleed procs that you might get. And this is why, with Nagantaka, the damage just completely breaks. As you see, the moment we stack any kind of base damage, there is no chance any enemy survives before the bleed procs even take effect. If we let the bleed procs take effect, this guy took one. It's 16k that 16k would be the normal bleed proc because, as we said, the only thing scaling this bleed proc would be the Bane mode and not Xata's Whisper itself. So you can think Xata's Whisper of +1 multi-shots, or double multi-shots rather, my bad. You can think of it as doubling your multi-shots, and the second shot, or the other shots that are Xata's Whispered, they deal whatever damage you see in this screen. So if you have 91% damage that I do right now, you will do your gun's damage, and then you will do your gun's damage again with 91% efficiency. But if we add something like Bane of Grenier, this is how the maths out. Take this calculator here. We have 1.55 plus 0.91, or actually no, wait, 0.91 times 1.55. What's happened? 0.91 times 1.55. Thank you. So we get two shots that one deals 1.55 and the other one deals this much if you have 91% Xata's Whisper. So your Bane of Grenier mode in total gives you a damage multiplier of 2.9605%. Very odd, very specific, but if it was 100% Xata's Whisper, we would have a 3.1% or 3.1 times damage increase. This right here, this damage number is a multiplier to whatever damage you're dealing. Which basically means that right now, if we had to match the damage of Eclipse with Xata's Whisper, we would need to have a Xata's Whisper that is, or like, let's say, if our Eclipse was 400% strong, our Xata's Whisper to match it would need to be around 135% strong. But then, Xata's Whisper procs on whatever bleed procs you do twice. So you get an extra chance to get DOT procs from there that also scale from your Bane mode. Which is why Xata's Whisper for late game builds is completely broken. And not only that, you have to remember that Xata's Whisper also has the synergy with the bubble. So any kind of weapon that we get that can be attracted by the bubble and has punch through completely breaks. So if I prime these guys, as long as I hit them, you see that I shot one person and a lot of them got hit from it? Or some bullets flying up there? That is because of Xata's Whisper. And its interaction with the Bubonico thing, you know, the bullet just being attracted to the bubble over and over. Overall, the philosophy you need to have for those three abilities is as follows. Before Eclipse gets nerfed, Eclipse is for straight up damage. You want straight up damage with your guns, you want to one-shot someone with Kuvazar without the need of dot proc or punch munitions or something, you go Eclipse. You wanna use the Xata and one-shot anybody in your path without needing internal bleeding, just straight up damage, you go Eclipse. You have Contagion that double dips, you go Eclipse. You have something else, you go Eclipse. In general, you want to go Eclipse if you just care about killing enemies before any type of dot procs are needed. If you need dot procs to kill the enemies, or you need abilities that actually deal damage to kill the enemies, then your best bet is to go for Roar. And this is why I go for Roar on my Ember build, because Ember build relies on heat procs to kill the enemies from your guns. So Roar is our best contender for that build. And if you want to play around with synergies and get some... how can I explain this? If you want to play around with synergy and get some... why do I get... On my head, I'm thinking the word wanky. I'm sorry. It doesn't make any sense. Wacky. Yeah, wacky. We get a wacky kind of synergy, wacky damage numbers, wacky multipliers from Bane of Grenier modes and shit like that. Then you want to go for Xata's Whisper. Because on Xata's Whisper on a gun that has multiplicative CO and Bane of Grenier mode and dot procs, where is it? You know, it's gonna completely break. If your gun has multiplicative CO, a Bane mode, triple dot setup, you know, and then you add Xata's Whisper to that. Well, in case we haven't seen it before, and this is before any type of, you know, stacks. With stacks, this just happens. Enemies die before they even know they die. Overall, it's really simple. And if you want to know about gun synergies, you have to imagine what the gun does. Is it a projectile? Does it have infinite punch through? Can it hit multiple targets if it gets attracted again and again? And this is kind of what you have to think when thinking, do I take Xata's Whisper or not? And the other thing that you have to think about is the way you're playing with Bane mods, multiplicative COs, and bleed procs. If you want to take benefit from all of these together, then Xata's Whisper is your best bet. If you want to one-shot the enemies, then Eclipse is your best bet. And if you want to kill enemies through dot procs, then Roar is your bet. And that's basically about it for all these abilities. Now, one last thing that is very weird is on Chroma. Where is he? I lost him. I lost my Chroma. Hello? There he is. Vex armor scales multiplicative with glaive attacks. I am not sure why it does, but it does. So, if I can find my Zoris, I don't even need to show you the build. You can do this with any type of Zoris, trust me. Look. You see that? On glaives, Chroma's Vex armor is multiplicative 1000% damage? 1000% Eclipse? Now, I'm not sure why. Like, you see this and I haven't even activated Nourish for the extra damage from there. That is literally 300% almost. It is 300% if I had Mother, right? So, you know, that is a funny thing to know if you're interested in that, and that's why I said that when Mirage gets shipped, if she gets shipped like that, she's gonna be broken with glaives, and everyone is gonna run Joris on her. Because you have to imagine that Chroma being 275%, if Mirage is at base 350, she can reach around 1500% with the correct build. And 1500% Eclipse on, like, the way it works now multiplicatively on a glaive, it's gonna completely break the meta. So now let's see what abilities are multiplicative and what abilities are additive. So Eclipse for now multiplicative. Garuda's passive is multiplicative. Limbo's third ability augment is additive. Mesa's second ability is also additive. Saryn's third is multiplicative. Excalibur third's ability augment is additive. Neza's second ability is multiplicative. Mirage's sound's second ability, I don't even remember what it's called. It's multiplicative, and it's also multiplicative with itself. So if you get the same weak spot on an enemy, you get a multiplier times a multiplier and completely breaks, which is why it's the best type of damage buffing in the game. Then we have Gara's fourth ability, which is, I believe, a multiplier, and it works like a Bane mode as well, so it multiplies with Xata's Whisper. Max Bubble is also a multiplier. What else is there? Volt Shield multiplier, we said that. I think Gaia's first ability is also a multiplier, but it's on enemy weapons which deal 0 damage, so it's not that useful. I think Doom was additive. I'm not 100% sure, but if I remember correctly, Doom is additive. But it's still really broken, even though it's additive. I might be wrong. It might be multiplicative, and that's why it might seem so broken. But, you know. Rhino is multiplicative. I think Vauban had a damage buffing thing right now with his passive, which is also multiplicative. And it works like Roar completely. And does Frost have anything? I forgot. He doesn't have anything, right? Yeah, he doesn't. Except he has an augment. He doesn't have anything. But yeah, that's basically about it. That's kind of all you have to know about damage buffing abilities to understand what works and what doesn't, and how you would need to mod. So, if you want my opinion, it's generally on the weapon what you want to pick. For example, if I wanted to play my Tetra, and I wanted to play with a primary fire, then I would go for Xata's Whisper build. Why? Because the primary fire of the Tetra has a mod called Kinetic Ricochet, which allows projectiles to bounce after they land onto enemies. Which, you know, it looks funny, and it can do some chaotic stuff on the battlefield, so... Plus a lot of damage, obviously. But if I instead wanted to go for a build that is focused on the secondary fire, I would go Roar. Because on the secondary fire, all I want to do is throw it and wait for the bleed proc to kill the enemies. So it's on my best interest to go Roar here. And I fell down. But it doesn't matter. I think any enemy that was dealt a bleed proc died. These two didn't get a bleed proc. One guy here didn't get a bleed proc. And 3 guys here also didn't get a bleed proc. But they got dealt some nice damage anyways. Overall, it's dependent on the gun. And for elemental type of damage, it's dependent on what you have on your Warframe. And if you have everything on your Warframe, you want your gun to either be empty and pick utility modes, or you want your gun to have the element that you are missing. So, the kitten wants to leave my room because he has no idea how he came in here and he probably needs to take a dump. But I myself needs to take some sleep. But I do hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something. And I do hope to see you on the next one.